There we go.
We're back.
Working. Okay, it's been a couple of weeks since we posted anything. Been busy, out of town. Just got a few minutes to get this done. So here's the plan tonight. We'll talk a little bit about the All-Star Duel, just initial things, how it went. Then we're going to try to combine some rankings and all-star match results. So just start off, this All-Star Duel went well.
It definitely was a great event. I think, I talked to a lot of people there. Most people were pretty, I'm gonna say everybody I talked to was pretty excited about it. We'll go down the matches. I think the overall experience, hopefully the state enjoyed that. I really hope the idea is we've done it once and, we hope to continue year after year with that. We would like to get it built up into an event that, I saw a lot of younger guys there watching these, some of the toughest kids in the state wrestle. And I think it reached some of those people. And I think if we continue to grow it, I think there's some things we could change or, maybe try to make better. I do, while we're talking about it, want to thank Darren Thomas for doing the announcing. He's done a lot of that. Many of you guys that still go to the U State get to see Darren. He's usually on the microphone doing music and whatnot. So I believe he had a pretty good time doing that, and I believe he will continue year after year with us. So
Yeah, I think overall it went really well. I mean, couldn't ask for better, more competitive matches. I mean, we had one pin, and that was late in the third period when that pin came about. So all the matches were good competitive matches. Officials, I don't think we talked too much about them until we got down there Saturday. Joe Catan and Jim Harden both did a good job. Probably at most events, 50% of the people are not going to be happy about the officiating at some point. So, but I think overall there weren't too many issues with calls. Not that it necessarily matters a whole lot with Joe. Joe's pretty confident in his calls, so he's not going to listen too much to coaches giving him a hard time. But those guys did a great job. We appreciate them coming out and doing that.
yeah, I think there was one questionable call that everybody was wondering about. But I think it's wrestling. That sometimes stuff is too close to. It comes down to a judgment on that. Sometimes calls I think could go either way. So it kind of is what it is. So
Yeah. Well, your call.
maybe an ideal instead of jumping around.
Okay.
What do you think?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure it out. Okay.
Well, we'll just run down through the All-Star results. So at 106 we had Blake Roth and Nate Wheeler. I don't think it was quite the scenario we anticipated. I think most people, if you would ask them, they were expecting a 2-to-1 match, 3-to-2, with not much action. But I was pretty surprised. Both guys came out, kind of opened up, and tried to score and put some points on the board. So it was they made it exciting. Came out to wrestle, and that was a good one.
Yeah, I was kind of curious how that was going to be with those two guys. For one, they're so familiar with each other. They've wrestled quite a few times coming up. And even, this summer at ETC, those guys have wrestled a ton together. So I was worried about them at the beginning, being the very first guy coming out, the music going. We had these fog machines. We were scared we were going to set off the smoke alarms, and the music playing. And sometimes when you're the first guy out there, you kind of. I was wondering how the nerves would be for those guys, but it was a good match. I think they both were aggressive. I have a feeling those two will probably meet up again. Considering they're both going to be at 106. Top guys at 106 in my opinion. I believe we're probably going to see a few more battles this year between those guys. So glad they could start it out, and it was an exciting match, just like we anticipated. And I think the state anticipated it as well. I think that was one that was almost a dead heat, 50-50 of who was going to win. So good match to you guys.
Yeah, good job. And I'll maybe just throw a few little tidbits on rankings. So these guys came in number 2 and 6, and you kind of alluded to it, that these are going to be 2 of the top guys at 106 all year. So I think when we make some tweaks, these 2 are going to be right up near the top. Nothing we saw Sunday made us think anything different, except these will be 2 of the top guys all year.
I agree. All right, next, Tylen Tucker and Michael Maddox. I think voting wise, everyone was leaning towards Tylen. It was Tylen. He had no issue with that. Now I believe it was 11-2. That was the score. Tylen came out looking to score. I think I noticed with Maddox, I don't know how much he had been on the mat, and I know Tylen was looking as solid as I've seen him all year. I think ranking wise, these guys were the 1 and the 2 on the rankings. Don't see a whole lot changing there with those guys. There's 3-4 guys up there. Actually, about the first 6 at 113 are pretty solid. Tylen, I think at this point has kind of obviously established himself as the guy at 113. We've talked about some issues with what happens with some lineups and whatnot, but in my opinion, Ty came out and proved why he was the top guy at 113. So I think Maddox, in fairness to him, I think once the season comes around, he gets going full speed on the wrestling mat. That I've seen him wrestle better than that, and I'm sure that just like Blake and Nate, these guys are going to see each other again. So
Yeah, I will add, I know one of the things that I've heard a lot with Harrison County and being, that's my home school.
what's their mascot?
Thoroughbred.
Thoroughbreds.
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the things they've been kind of criticized a lot over the years is not the toughest schedule. And so they don't necessarily get tested as much as some of these other guys. But from what I'm hearing, they're definitely planning on getting in some tougher tournaments. We might actually even see them once or twice this season. So I expect those guys to get to the end of the season a little more battle ready, and ready to have some of these big matches like this. So I think Maddox will get to the end of the year and he'll be right there ready to push Tucker and anybody else there at 113.
Next, 120, Ryan Moore and Austin Cook. That was, I think, the state, as far as the poll we put out, I believe most people were in favor of Ryan, at least voting wise, of who was going to win. And, Ryan came out there and, wrestled like we kind of figured he would. With Cook, I figured Cook would be a pretty good sized kid. He is definitely, we had talked about that before. He's always, I remember back in middle school, he was always, seemed like he was always wrestling against Mason. And he was a big kid back then. Some kids just, they can take the weight off, and, for size wise, he is always someone that's pretty large for his weight class. Match kind of went, at first it looked, pretty tough match between those two, and then, Ryan just started kind of pouring it on. It ended up being 12-0. I think Cook kind of I haven't seen him. I saw him a lot this year at ETC, and I haven't seen him in a while, and I believe that's because St. X has started their own kind of deal over there, doing their conditioning and whatnot. So I don't, I imagine Cook will get down to 20 this year. Be looking to, I imagine see Ryan again. State finals would probably be a good thing. So I don't know how much any of that would have changed anything. I think ranking wise. That was kind
Yeah,
of what we thought.
Yeah, it should, should stay pretty well set. I guess the only other thing around 120 is, with, Saul being moved up to 126.
That's true.
We've heard a lot of discussion, from a few different people about a few of the guys in the union lineup, and that they are growing and growing. So that's why you see Saul and Bryce up at 26 and 32 now, and then even they were at the combine.
Yeah, they were just at the combine, and I have the weighing sheet. So these guys, I think some kids have an art of cutting weight, and they're going to have some work to do if the original plan was to get down to that 20 and that 28 or 26 actually. But we'll see. I believe Bryce is registered at Super 32.
26, and I think Saul's registered for 120, so we'll see
And
how it goes.
yeah, and not just those guys making weight. I think anybody, if they want to, can make weight. But I'd be curious to see if those guys can get down that low. How are they actually going to perform out there? And I don't know if sometimes getting down in weight is, some kids just don't wrestle the best at that weight. So, and I think last year at the state tournament with that layoff, I didn't see the same two union guys that I normally see, and I really think some of that had to do with the weight and keeping it off that long. So, those guys are very smart down there. They are gonna, I imagine Urban's gonna put them in a best position that they're gonna wrestle the best, and they're gonna have some success. So, we'll see how that plays out. As of now, our gut says 26 and 32, but like I said, we'll see how that works out for those guys.
Okay, 126, Zane Brown and Joey Roberts. I think we'd mentioned that these two guys split last year, had a couple back and forth matches, and this was kind of right along those lines. Zane came out early, got the lead. Roberts battled and hung in there. I think that was a match that there were a couple of calls that some people disagreed on, maybe even both ways, but a good tight match. I think Zane won 5-3, right down to the end, where one little flurry could have changed that outcome. But Zane's pretty tough. Usually doesn't let that kind of stuff get to him. He finds a way just to hang in there in those tight matches.
Yeah, I have to say that I was that was one match I was really looking forward to. I know there was kind of some build up to the first time those guys were gonna meet last year, and the match definitely ended up being the match that I figured it would be. Zane, I see him wrestle all the time. I've been to a lot of tournaments with him this summer, and he competes. I watched him beat Humphreys this year. That was pretty impressive. And Zane's had some big wins, and he's kind of a young guy coming up. And as far as Roberts, I was impressed with Roberts. I mean, it was a 2-point match, but those guys were going back and forth, and I think everybody will kind of keep an eye on that weight this year. I think those guys, you put Saul up in the mix at 26 if he ends up staying there. You have Hanson up there. There's a lot of quality kids at that weight. And as far as the match itself, you're right. I didn't know if I was going to have to call security. I mean, it was getting a little heated in the gym, and that's great. It's wrestling, you know what I mean? And I don't mind watching some parents and some people get a little excited. It's a tough sport, and fans are passionate about it. And I thoroughly enjoyed that match, and like I said, we'll see that match a couple more times this year, I imagine, and I'm sure each time it's going to be as exciting as this one. So
Yeah. So I guess at 26, Zane kind of, for the moment, solidified his spot up there. and I guess just to kind of go back, 'cause I had a few people ask me about Saul being number 2, and most of the time moving up a weight class is not a big deal, but to go from 106 to 126, 3 weight classes, and Zane won't be a small 126. He's gonna be a big, strong kid there. So, and he competed right there at 120 last year. So I'm giving Zane a little bit of the edge right now.
Yeah, I could see that. I think we'll see how it plays out. I don't want to go too much into it with the 120, the 126. We'll have another deal where we're going to talk about rankings and some movements, and we'll see what happens there. That we spend too much time on this, all ends up at 20, and this conversation's for nothing. So we'll see. 32, Keegan Duncan and Jordan Monroe. Keegan ends up winning the match 11-5. I have to say that I was very impressed with Jordan. Watching him get a takedown, and I just saw him before that. I know he was dealing with a little bit of an injury, he told me. But Keegan, I've said it all. I've said it for a long time. Keegan is probably the most sound wrestler in our state. His position, he is so tough to score on. Monroe got a takedown, and that's not an easy task to do with Keegan Duncan. So, I think Jordan will have some success this year. Problem is at 32, as of now, rankings-wise, it's insane. You ask people who are the top 5 kids in wrestling, well, they probably named the first 3, 132 pounders on our list. So,
yeah,
we'll see what happens. Monroe, he was good size. He was definitely a good size 132. We'll see how that shakes out up there. I'll say it again, there is no way that Duncan, Sheffer, and Erdman all end up in the same weight class. I could be wrong, but some of these kids get crazy and they're going this weight and that weight. We'll see. I know that when all these rankings are put here, these rankings will look different by the time it comes to the state. The state meet, this guy will go here, this guy will go there, this guy will drop down, this guy will go up. So for any of your wrestlers that are putting all the weight on what the sheet says right now, I assure you that there will be some changing factors that work into this. I'm gonna shut the door. Go ahead.
Yeah, as you can probably tell, we got a nice storm rolling in, and we left the door open. There we go. One thing I will add at 132, I had to give Keegan a little pat on the back. We spent a bunch of time. Anybody that's been in practice with me, and more than once or twice, at some point we're going to go over a front headlock and spend a lot of time working on a front headlock. And I think Keegan scored at least 3 takedowns, maybe 4 takedowns off a front headlock in that match. So he was definitely scoring some brownie points with me.
He's tough. He's definitely tough. So I think he'll probably have to. He's doing some visits now for schools, so I'm sure we'll end up seeing Keegan somewhere on a roster, somewhere in college. So, all right.
Okay, 138. Trent Johnson, Dallas Miles. Trent won that one 6-2. Good battle. Trent. I know this was one where I think everybody, or quite a few people, were a little disappointed at the last second. Angel Vasquez had got hurt at a soccer game. I remember what day that was, like Wednesday or Thursday.
Thursday, I think he called me.
It was late in the week when he called and let us know that he was hurt. So hopefully that's not anything major for Angel. He's already back healthy, running around the soccer field. So I'm sure Trent was probably had struggled a little bit. You know, he's getting all geared up for a big match against Angel, and he definitely had to be careful because Dallas is tough. I mean, we've seen him beat the 138 last year was just crazy. Everybody beating everybody. So, and Dallas is right in there, you know, hanging with the best of them. So. Trent was able to get himself focused and come out and wrestle Dallas well, because you know, if he had let himself get distracted thinking, you know, oh, I'm not wrestling Angel now, and that definitely could have been lopsided the other way, because Dallas is tough, and as we learned in a match last year, he can make some things go badly really quick.
Oh,
so.
my goodness.
Nothing really
Yeah.
jumps out from the match itself.
Nah, I think the match itself with Dallas, you know, like he was talking about, I text Dallas, actually text his dad, and it was 20 minutes later, he called me back, said, heck, I'll wrestle. And this is Thursday night, and we were wrestling on Sunday.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think at the time, you know, Dallas was pretty heavy. You know, any of these guys, that's why we gave everybody a weight allowance, you know. All these guys, someone had made a comment about, well, why is there a weight allowance? Because if these guys are going to wrestle these weight classes, they're not walking around October 3rd at that weight, I assure you. So, you know, with Dallas, he had some weight to take off, so we made a compromise, let Trent put a couple pounds, leave a couple pounds on. Dallas had to bring a few down, which Dallas, good job on the attempt. So, you know, Dallas was a gamer. He was like, sure, absolutely. I think his dad told me immediately as soon as he got off the phone, he took off outside and started jogging in the neighborhood trying to get some pounds off. So, you know, and that's, you know, I had reached out to a few people and, you know, they declined, and that's okay. But, you know, it was nice to call Dallas and him like, absolutely, I'll be there. You know, I don't know if the free t-shirt and the singlet made that much difference, but thank you again, Dallas, for coming. I'm sure you guys have wrestled a few times, and you know, I imagine you guys will wrestle again. So thanks for coming, and good match, guys.
Yeah, definitely appreciate those. You know, we had a couple guys that were relatively last-minute adds, and so big pat on the back to anybody that jumped in last second like that, and you know, didn't give a second thought. So we appreciate that. 145, another one of our 1-2 matchups. Mason Smith won 13-4 over Jordan Kidwell. These two guys have been kind of far apart weight-wise in the last few years, so it's kind of a matchup we weren't really sure what to expect coming in. Kidwell's wrestled 152 the last 2 years, and I was actually just kind of wondering how his weight was going to go, you know, coming in. Was he going to struggle to get to the 145 plus 5, or if that would be no big deal? It seemed like it wasn't a huge issue. And then we saw Mason you know, coming in wrestling a bigger guy, and you know, not really any issue. That's why he's number one here right now. He's shown he can go up move up in these weight classes without any problem at all. Kind of like a couple of the others, you know, this one the score kind of got a little bigger spread later in the match. Anybody that's watched Mason knows he can be pretty tough on top, and when he gets going, I've even found out once or twice that he gets doing what he's doing on top, and unless you are really in shape and ready to battle, it's tough to stop. So kind of that one got a little bit bigger margin there in the third period.
Yeah, I talked about it last time. I think with Mason, you know, growth-wise, you know, it was 13 in 8th grade in high school. You know, the next year, I guess he came back at 32. This year, you know, it's 45, and you know, it's going to take some work. So I think it was, you know, it took a little bit of time to get accustomed to, you know, some of those guys and the size, and you know, so some off-season work, a little bit of lifting, a little bit of you know, at trying to get his body matured, you know, to go against those bigger, stronger guys. And you know, we always think about kids coming up. You know, you come up and you know you're an 8th grader and you're wrestling 106, 113. Well, there's not a lot of seniors there, and you know, so when I see kids come up and you know, freshmen wrestling 38 or 45 or 52, you know, majority of the time, you know, you're running into a junior or a senior, you know what I mean? And, you know, half the time that little freshman guy doesn't even have hair on his face. So, you know, I think it was a good match. You know, I talked quite a bit to Jordan's dad. We had texts back and forth. And, you know, Jordan, I'd said it before, we had an opportunity to have him on a team with us. He's absolutely hardworking, doesn't stop wrestling, polite kid. So, you know, we'll see how it goes this year. You know, those two guys, I know they're in the same region. You know, we'll see. They both end up at 45. You know, I imagine they'll see each other again. So
Yeah, it's just what I was thinking, that those top 3 guys, Smith, Kidwell, Wiley, all from Region 6, so they could see each other a few times this season.
yeah, I imagine.
Especially right there at the end. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, so yeah, good match. Brady Emerson and Andrew Bailey. This is a match that I don't even remember how the state was. I think the majority of the state was leaning towards Emerson. You know, I saw Andrew had come to my house, I guess maybe that Thursday before. And, you know, I watched him and Mason roll around for, you know, darn near 2 hours, you know, wrestling each other. And, you know, I could tell Andrew hadn't, you know, it looked like conditioning would play into it a little bit. I don't think he'd been on the mat as much as, you know, he probably should have been. But, you know, even watching during that session, you know, I didn't catch a whole lot of it, but the parts that I did, Andrew's pretty crafty. He went down there against Emerson. You know, we had joked before about Emerson's just big, and he's kind of a difficult matchup for people. I mean, he really is. Watching him, you just, you know, him and his brother, you just never know what's going to happen. Those guys will flop around, and I think watching that match, it, you know, went to overtime. So, you know, we have an overtime match down there, a 4-2, and you know. You put Bailey and Matt Shake down there, you know, ready to go. You know, what ends up happening in that match? I have a feeling if both those guys stay at 52, and I don't know where they'll go weight-wise. You know, it wouldn't surprise me to see Brady down at 45. You know, I don't know. Does Bailey stay at 60? Does he go 60? Does Kidwell go 52, or does Bailey go 52 and Kidwell go 45? That's what I was trying to say before. Putting weight on what's here, you just don't know these kids' bodies and how they feel, and not to mention the body fat test.
Yeah, the body fat test. We'll start seeing some of those here in the next month.
Yeah, so once we start seeing body fat tests and seeing where kids can go, you know, I think these rankings and this list kind of changes a little bit. So good match, Andrew. I was very impressed. Brady, you were fun to watch wrestle. So. That ended up being a lot better match than you know I pictured in my mind. So, you know, good match, guys.
Yeah, it was kind of exciting to have an overtime match. All the tight matches we had, this was the only one. You know, I was waiting for that first overtime match and to see how long the overtime was going to go. Did we have? Were we going to have a match go 15 minutes of overtime until someone just finally collapsed? But didn't quite get there. But we did get the overtime excitement with Emerson pulling it out. Our other 152 match, Tristan Badita and Derek Smallwood. Had a few people ask me about Smallwood. I guess not as many people are, I guess, completely aware of all what's going on. You know, he's not ranked because, at least at this point, all the information we have is he's not going to be competing during the season because of his transfer. You know, I guess something could happen that could get worked out, and he'd be eligible to compete, and then he would obviously get thrown in there. And as he showed us on Sunday, he will be one of the top guys in there at 152. He is tough. It was actually a pretty easy decision when we had our little group get together to talk about the outstanding wrestler. Just the way he went out there and he was looking to score nonstop for the entire 6 minutes. You know, as you can tell with the score, he won 21-11. He was aggressive and putting points on the board. I have to say a little bit about it. I had a little discussion with Baditto right before he walked out there, and it was kind of funny. He was determined that he wasn't going to go out there and be in a 4-2 overtime match. He said there's going to be some sparks flying one way or the other. It might be me, it might be him, but some excitement's going to happen. And they went out there and they definitely put some points on the board. 21-11. That's a lot.
Oh yeah. In fairness to Tristan, honestly, he looked tired to me. I don't think, as far as questioning his wrestling ability, I fast forward to the state tournament. Is that match 21-11? Probably not. I think between those two, watching Derek score and score and score, we have to attribute some of that to, I would say this summer. For anybody that's been down to an ETC room and watching that practice, it is high intensity. The ideal is every night to break the guy you're wrestling. So, I think most of these guys, they sense someone getting tired. They sense, okay, this guy's not putting up much fight. They're going to do whatever they can to pour on points. And, I think that's a philosophy down there. And watching Derek Smallwood wrestle, I watch him wrestle at practice with that same philosophy. And I think in the match, I think he saw Baditto was getting tired, and he smelled blood and attacked. I think that's really what it is. And like I said, in fairness to Tristan, I believe season comes, he's in wrestling shape, he's ready to go. I've seen him wrestle quite a few times, and that's what it looked like to me. It looked like, I've watched thousands of matches, and he just looked tired, and we've all seen kids go through that and get to a point where it's, oh my goodness, all right, how much time's left? And I can't say enough that, Tristan will be one of the top guys this year at 152. He will train and he will be ready to go.
Yeah, 152 could be interesting. We in these two matches we saw number 4, 5, and 6, and then kind of the unknown with Smallwood, who maybe looked the best out of all 4 guys. And then that's not even talking about Ben Barton or Jordan Blanton or Jackson Oxford. So 152 could be right up there competitive wise with what we have at the top of 132, and you talked about 113 being pretty deep. So that'll be interesting and exciting to see how that plays out and how many of those guys really are at 152.
So I think us as a state and us doing these rankings and arguing and going back and forth, last year our opinion 138 was the toughest. And at least at the top, having the most talent. There was just so many kids, 1 through 8, that they had all beaten each other at one time. And I think this, depending on where this falls out with 52, I think it's pretty tough up top. We'll see how that works. And I don't know, as of now, 52, 32, those are pretty stout weights. So, and even 26.
Yeah.
26 with those guys. So it's going to be an exciting season. Next, Andrew Ackley and Max Andrioni. The score ended up being 8-4. We had Andrew at 1, Max at 2. This was it was a good match. We had talked about this and we had discussed, okay, who's gonna, I have to say before the match started, I was leaning with Max thinking he's just gonna be too strong. Just too strong for him, and it was kind of funny with Andrew. I think Ackley at one point, we had made comments about that just insane head and arm that he has, and I think at one point they were on the mat and he almost tried to hit one on the mat, and we were making a comment.
He did, yeah.
Making a comment. Well, he does it on his feet or his knees, and it was actually an exciting match. I think between those guys, they they definitely, in my opinion, have established themselves as two of the top guys up there at 60. You know, obviously you have Heidorf in there. But you know, those guys at the top, it would not hurt my feelings whatsoever to see a state finals of those two guys. It would be definitely an exciting match, and you know, and even the score 8-4. I think Max got the lead, and he wasn't letting up on him. So
Yeah, I think he did slow down a little when he almost got trapped. Almost got his head caught. I think that put him on the defense a little bit. Kind of had a flash that could have been in trouble. Yeah, I don't know if these guys will run into each other at all during the season, but hopefully somewhere in there, Ackley, Andreoni, Heidorf, and even if Little is able to get down to 160, we see those guys match up a few times during the season, and mix it up a little bit.
yeah.
Okay, our other 160 match, Heidorf and Raymond Williams. This one, there was definitely some action. I was actually messing around with the video from Sunday, watching a little bit of it, and I had to do a battery change on my camera, so there were two sections of video, and I started the second one up, and this was the matchup that came up. And there was a lot of action at the beginning of this one. Heidorf had a couple of really good attacks and looked like he was going to score. And I can just imagine Williams and Little battling every day at practice.
Oh, yeah.
There's got to be bodies flying all over the place and just amazing athletic agility. There was a couple times that I thought Williams, he was getting taken down, and he is able to escape and not give up the points.
Ken Griffey Jr. Looks just like Raymond. If you're out there watching this, I think I told you a couple years ago when I saw you that you remind me of Ken Griffey Jr. So I was curious. I bet he can hit a baseball. I swear it looks just like Ken Griffey Jr. I was very impressed with him. Watching Heidorf come out, I don't think I've ever seen him move that fast. I mean, he was going from one thing to another, to another, to another. I mean, it was almost, I was fascinated. I was like, holy crap, look at Heidorf go. And then, I think anything else, the pace started slowing down.
Yeah, I think both guys slowed.
And if you ever seen Hudson, if I had to bet on one kid getting a takedown, he is. Yeah, I say the word crafty a lot. Watching him when Heidorf wrestles, he is very skilled, and he is, he goes from one thing to another. So we all get on our kids we coach. Oh, chain wrestle. We need to go from here, and if this isn't here, you need to look for this. And Heidorf is pretty darn good at doing that. I think that Heidorf came out in a flurry. Raymond did an incredible job of defending. And then, after that, it looked like the match slowed down. So, we'll see. I don't know how much Raymond bit on the mat, but my opinion is when he gets in shape, ready to go, it looked like he could probably take a few pounds off, and I think he'll be ready to go. I could see him. I think at this point we have him 8th. I could see him going up.
Yeah, the only thing he's right now he's in that 152 meat grinder, and we'll see how that works out. I did talk to him afterwards, and I think the plan for now is for both him and Little to be at 52 and 60. But again, like we said, that plans could change a lot in the next few weeks.
Who knows? All right, 70. Casey Cornett and Jonathan Little. We just talked about his teammate Raymond Williams. That match was actually a pin. I think it was the only pin of the tournament. Watching Casey, I figured he would go out there and do what Casey does. Anybody that's watched him wrestle, on the mat, if you didn't know Casey, he's hard-nosed. I mean, he really is. I was just yesterday at a tournament with him and watching him wrestle, and I mean, it'd almost be intimidating, you know, if you were a wrestler watching this kid wrestle. You know, he is physical, and it was funny. It was the second match of our duel yesterday, and I watched this kid get kind of. Well, the kid kind of got, I'm not going to say punky, but, you know, he kind of got pretty physical with Casey, and, you know, Casey just kind of had a look like, oh, it's going to be that kind of party, huh? And just manhandled this kid. And so I like that. I like kids when, you know, the whistle blows, they're as hard-nosed as it comes. And then afterwards, you know what, you watch Casey afterwards, he'll shake hands and, hey, good match. But when that whistle blows, I like that switch that goes off for Casey. And, you know, watching those guys wrestle, Little, you know, I think he's going to compete up there. He definitely, I don't know, you know, does he go down to 60? We'll see. You know, as of now, we have him at 4. You know, we'll see where those guys shuffle around. But, yeah, him having a good workout partner. You know, you guys see that a lot. You know, you see these guys that are all close in weight. And a lot of times those are the kids that end up being, you know, some of the better kids on a team. You know, you see that year in, year out. I used to think, watching the Union kids, you'd have Trey there, Jace, and you'd have Brock. And I think they were all 3 weight classes apart. And, you know,
Those guys are right there together.
And those guys were hammers. And, you know, my opinion in that is those guys are wrestling tough with each other every single day. You know, it's a little tough when you have a tough 195 on your team and your 113's a hammer. Well, those guys probably aren't wrestling that much. So I imagine with those two, Williams and Little, they're probably battling every single day together, and, you know, they're making each other better. So,
yeah,
good
definitely.
match, guys.
182, Max Emerson and Elijah Allgaier. We talked a little bit about Emerson already. Well, the Emerson brothers, and just this one didn't have the scoring that I expected.
Not at all.
I think both guys kind of played it a little close to the vest. Didn't take a lot of chances. I'm not sure if they were giving each other too much respect and, you know, not wanting to get caught in something and get themselves in trouble. Ended up 4-1, so just not a lot of activity. I don't know, just definitely not. I don't know. I would say my experience watching these two guys wrestle, this was the outlier match for both of them. With you know, not putting a lot of points on the board, they typically tend to do a lot of scoring, and even, you know, talk about the matches yesterday. And Max is out there getting takedowns and turning people, so this was a little bit of a surprise just with the low scoring match here.
Yeah, I agree. That wasn't the match that I think if you played the video before this one, we had talked about. You know, that was probably going to be, you know, a fairly high scoring match. Those two have wrestled before. They spent some time together at ETC this year, and you know, it was a match 4-1. It wasn't you know, I'm not going to say disappointing because I thought it was going to be just crazy fireworks, but it was, you know, both guys went out there and wrestled pretty solid. You know, a 4-1 match is you know, it's a good contest. You know, it sounds like smart wrestling.
And I guess one note I'll add, I'm pretty confident after talking with Elijah's dad that he could be 195 for the season. He really struggled getting his weight down for this. Just been growing this off season, and he was a small 95 last year, but he could be a true 195 this season.
He's a pretty solid kid.
Yeah,
he's definitely good size.
So, you know, that maybe that was a factor too. If he was spending a lot of time beforehand focused on just getting his weight down, maybe it took a little bit out of him and slowed him down.
All right. Well, 195. Tyler Francrone and Andrew Davidson.
I will add, I think I posted it on our thread, that even though this was the 195 match, these guys were lighter than our 182s.
Yeah, I don't. That match there was. First, I'll say, you know, it was a 5-3 match. That is one of the best matches I've ever seen Tyler Francrone wrestle. I really, Tyler he kind of reminds me of, he can score on you whenever he wants to, but it seems like a lot of times he gets up a couple scores and he's like, okay, how much time, and he really, I was very impressed with him. And and Andrew, he was wrestling, he was darn near Chicago, wasn't he? Drove all the way down here to get a match. A ranked kid said, you know what, I will come down. I think he referred to Tyler Francone as the Hawk. He said, I'll come down and wrestle the Hawk. And, and that says a lot, and that's probably why he's the top ranked kid in the country, and he's getting ready to go to college, for wrestling. So, to get a phone call like that, you just imagine that atmosphere. It's different than, okay, well, we're going to go to a tournament in Iowa in 2 weeks, or go to Michigan, and that's one thing, but, getting a phone call that, hey, I want you to drive 4 hours to this state's event. You're going to wrestle a nationally ranked guy in just an all-star duel. I mean, that takes a lot to do that, and it was pretty impressive that a kid said, what, sure, I'll come down and wrestle. And the match was exactly, 5-3, two top guys. I think we had made a comment before about the takedown, and was it two? And the reality is, it was a great match. Take that two out of it, Andrew still needs a takedown to win. So he would have got a takedown at 5-3, or he would have got a takedown with that not count. He still needed a takedown to win. But Andrew, if you get a chance to see this, everybody's seen the movie Twilight, right? Everybody knows Edward. He looked identical to Edward. I don't, it was kind of funny. I said that to him. I said, I hope I don't hurt your feelings here. And he said, oh, I've never heard that. And then I guess they weighed in and went out to eat right there in E-Town. And he came back and he said, like 3 people told me I look like Edward. Twilight must be big here in Kentucky. And I'm like, well, it must be. So it's, anybody that was there and knows who I'm talking about, I think we all kind of agreed on that. So thank you again for those guys coming to do that. Some guys don't want to wrestle. Oh, okay, well, I'm already ranked, and both of those guys were like, heck yeah, I'll wrestle each other. So, awesome job to those guys.
Yeah, that was one of the highlights of the day for me. As we worked really hard trying to get that match set up, and we wanted it to be a good battle back and forth, and just wasn't sure what we were going to get out of it, and to have it be just like that, coming right down to the end, a battle to the last second. I was very impressed, and I was actually just on Flow the other day looking at some of the updates and some of the updated rankings, and Andrew's the number 24 junior, all weight classes. So, that was not just some random kid that Tyler beat, but that's a big win. And again, we for anybody who was there, we saw that some of his accomplishments, winning, being a Fargo champ. So that was a good win for Tyler. It's another one to add to his list.
Absolutely.
Of good accomplishments. Final match of the day: Brandon Reed, Colin Portman, our big guys. Now maybe I'm just kind of remembering it differently, but this was a 3-1 match. Not much different from the 182, but I felt like these guys kind of went after each other a little bit more. Once Portman rode out that third period pretty tough, but I just felt like there was a little more action than we had at 182. Maybe a little surprise. I guess some of the folks that hadn't seen Portman, is not that we've seen him a ton, but we've seen him a little bit this off season. Some folks may be surprised that Portman was able to win that match, but he's a tough kid, and even though he's pretty much focused on football right now, it kind of shows how good he really is to just show up on a Sunday after a Friday night football game and win a match like this.
Yeah, I would have to agree that, for one, these two guys, I've talked about both of them. I've had the pleasure of being around both of them. Hardworking, physical kids. These guys, I mean, when they're in the room wrestling, you know, and Reed, I see Brandon Reed a lot more than I do Portman. I haven't seen him in a while, obviously because of football. But you know, first I'll start with Brandon Reed. That he works. You know, you guys even see his post on Kentucky Wrestling of, you know, we're trying to get to this tournament, that tournament. He is an unbelievable kid. You know, to watch those two wrestle, you know, I was kind of worried. You know, Reed is full bore coming at you, and you know, and I worried how that would play into with Portman, because Portman, you know, I joked with quite a few people about it. He will send you for a ride. You know, you want to stay in position with him, and you know, the match itself 3-1. I have to say, watching that match, I wasn't really rooting for either one. I'm big fans of both of them, and I figured it would be a good, hard physical match. So I do know what this does as far as Portman. You know, right now we have Portman at 6. Is he 6? Mm-hmm. I think Portman will end up climbing. You know, a wise coach this year said that I could see Portman winning it. So, you know, I wouldn't argue with that. You know, there's some tough kids there. We make a lot of comments now that, you know, Myers isn't killing kids in 30 seconds. You know, 220, there's gonna be an actual battle there, and you know, it's gonna be a fun weight class to watch. So we'll see where these two end up, but I imagine they will probably meet up a few more times this year.
Yeah, I would think so. Both down the Louisville area, they will probably see each other a few times, and yeah, I think, and then you throw in Chandler from Mail down that same area. Those three guys might be battling a few times during the season, and you know, 220 kind of dropped off. Well, obviously after Austin, you had a big jump, but you definitely didn't have anybody excited to wrestle 220 the last few years. Where this year, I think there's a good number of solid kids. I mean, you look at the top 6 or 7 guys there; they're all pretty solid. That previous state placers that can all battle. It could be an exciting weight class.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's up for grabs with some of these guys.
Oh, yeah.
I don't. You know, we had 4 years of just people going, can I get to 195, or you know, should I go heavyweight? And you know, basically knowing that doesn't matter where I go, I'm not going to beat, you know, Austin. So there is some top guys there. I mean, 1 all the way through 7, 8, 9, even 10. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of tough kids there. So this will be a weight class that I think people will have some interest in watching. Just because there is some pretty big, strong, athletic kids there, and there's not one clear-cut favorite in my opinion. I really don't believe that, you know, I could put my finger and say this guy's winning it without a doubt. So we'll see.
Okay, well, that's it for the All-Star Classic. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope
It was only an hour.
yeah, not too bad.
And Stacy just told me you talk too much. Maybe I do. So we'll cut the next one down. I think he has a actual meeting to go to. So
yeah. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the event. We'll try to do a better job getting the word out and plan things a lot earlier next fall. You know, maybe even during the season, start making some contacts with who.
Yeah, who's going to come? I'm going to say this, that, you know, there was quite a few people that we were reached out to. And, you know, sure, there were some people I was disappointed that I called and asked if they wanted to wrestle. But, you know, looking back on it, you know, at least a handful of people I'm thinking of immediately were like, you know what, we got this going on, we're not interested. You know, and I can respect that. That's fine. I have to say, on the other hand, you know, if we were to call you and say, hey, do you want to do this? This is an event, you know, one, you should be honored. It should be like, wow, okay. I think what I need to do is just call the kids and not the parents. You know what I mean? Because I can't see any kid, yeah, you tell them free singlet, I'm in. When is it? And I, you know, that would be our hope, that a kid would say, you know what, I'm going to be in that tournament next year. And, you know, like I said, for the people that declined, I appreciate the ones that at least right up front were like, you know what, we got this going on, you know, we're not going to be interested. Now, the runaround of, you know, maybe, or no call back, I mean, it takes 2 seconds to send a text and say, hey, you know what, thanks for the offer, but we're not interested. You know, I can respect that, but just not answering something or change, I just don't get it. You know, I feel like all these kids, we've said it before, have worked so hard to be one of the top guys, you know, and I guarantee majority of these guys that are on these lists or the invites, they didn't start wrestling yesterday. These guys have put years and years and years, and you as parents, you know, you think about what you've done and the time you've devoted and the gas and the hotels and, you know, all the training that you could possibly do to put your son in the best position he could be in. You know, I think you showcase that talent. I think you leave it up to a kid and you let him have the option. You know, he's earned the right to be there. So next year, you know, I hope that, you know, we have a line 10 people long and we have to do wrestle-offs to see who's going to be in there. And, you know, we tried to accommodate a lot of kids in here. We tried to double up some weight classes and, you know, and what's the worst that can happen? You can lose. I mean, I don't, you know, we spend this time and this money and traveling and, you know, going to all these different places when you have an event here to have a tough match and wrestle a tough kid. And, you know, for me, that part of it doesn't really make any sense.
So keep this in mind. Next fall, we'll be doing this again.
That's fine.
We might even toyed with the idea of throwing out maybe a youth match or two, a middle school match or two, to get some younger guys out there as well. And like you said, showcase some of the
absolutely.
the young talent out there. So
That's a good idea.
So-
we could take that.
give us some feedback. You know, we want to make it better and better. I'm sure there are tons of things we can improve on. So let us know what you think.
Yeah, we can address that real quick. I think the one complaint I did hear about was the weigh-in, the 3 hours between. You know, just to be clear, weigh-in started at 12 and they went till 3, right? I mean, you know, as far as the weigh-ins, they could have really came anytime. I think the idea of giving that larger window is it being off season. We knew some of these kids were going to have to get some weight down and their bodies weren't used to that. So we were worried about, okay, you weigh in at, you know, 2 o'clock, we start wrestling at 3, you know, they hadn't had a chance to hydrate, to eat, and, you know, during the season, it's not really that big of a deal. They're doing it week in, week out.
Get the pattern.
Yeah, so I think that was kind of the concern. So we're gonna try to tweak that next year, see what we can figure out on weigh-in, or leave a window open of, you can weigh in as early as this, all the way up to this. And if that kid wants to walk in 20 minutes before, step on the scale, and he's ready to go, then, you know, I guess we can figure something out about that. So,
Okay.
all right, we're shutting up, because I will
Cut
sit
it
here
off.
and talk all night.
Okay.
All right, guys, we'll see you.